Hello, everyone. Welcome to Fantasy Football Predictive Analytics. Rhys Tiller with special guest Ryan McDowell. Ryan, how goes it?
Going really well, guys. Glad to be back with you all.
So Ryan is a special friend of the show. One of my best friends in the industry, and been in the league together, Hyper One, for
15-ish years, something like that. Yeah, it's been around a while.
I will say this, and I say this unequivocally, and Rhys is my keep me honest, all right? Other than family leagues on ESPN, every other league I have has Ryan McDowell's commish.
I think so, yes.
HA leagues or KS leagues.
Nice.
That's all I know,
nice.
except for the Scott Fishbowl, but
that's Ryan by proxy anyway.
Yeah, I help out in that one too. So
just because you're a great commish, Ryan, and you got kind of thrust into that Hyper One job back then. Nobody wanted it, and Ryan's like, I guess.
Yeah, that's kind of fun to look back on now. It was just a group of us on the Football Guys message board that about this time of year, it was probably a little bit later, but it was the off season, and we just wanted to be in an active league, in a league that had something going on year round. And it sounds crazy to think about it now because there's hundreds of leagues, thousands of leagues probably that are active year round. But back then it was tough to find one. So ultimately we decided to make our own, and and then tried to find somebody to be in charge. And I don't know what made me step up and take that role. I'd never run a league before, but did that and figured it out pretty quickly, and it took off from there. So it's been a fun ride, and I guess that really kind of started this side career that I have in fantasy football.
Yes, and it kind of propelled you as being the start commish kind of guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of the people, yourself included, that were in those leagues early on were people who were already doing some writing. And again, that's very common now, but back then not very common. You know, Sigmund Bloom and Matt Waldman, a couple of guys who have been in those leagues a long time, are your cohorts over at Football Guys. So then a few years later, when I started dipping my toe in the water a little bit, and I had some connections because of those leagues, and that helped for sure.
Oh yeah, it's big. Those leagues are big time now.
speaking of, you can go.
No. I was just gonna say I don't know about that. Well, they're fun leagues for sure.
Oh, you're big time.
Well, speaking of your Dynasty leagues, how are your Dynasty teams doing?
Yeah, not as well as last year, I would say. I did the math last night. It seems like that's the thing you do this time of year. I think I ended up in 21 leagues this year, 21 Dynasty leagues. A couple of those are best ball, and I've got 6 title games. So, not terrible, but lost a couple heartbreakers last week. Lost a playoff game by half a point in the I think that was the first round actually. So yeah, overall pretty good. You know, ask me again next week and we'll know for sure. But it's been just such a crazy year with obviously everything that's gone on to be able to survive and win a title this season. It feels like it almost should be worth double or something.
Oh yeah, it's almost like participation prize, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's just survival of the fittest this year, right?
I'm not very fit.
Me either.
So let's move a little bit into Dynasty. Of the current rookie quarterbacks, how do you have them ranked?
So I think at this point you have to put Justin Herbert at the top. At least I do. He's been so impressive. He's now has the rookie record for most 300-yard games in a season. Tied the rookie record for most passing touchdowns. I'm sure he'll break that next week. And he's put up the fantasy points as well, obviously, along with those numbers. So I like his situation a little better than Joe Burrow, even though I like Burrow's supporting cast there too. I think Burrow has some more questions as far as what that receiver core looks like next year, maybe even what that coaching staff looks like next year. And of course, those questions are there for Herbert as well when it comes to the coaching staff. But I think we're going to see an upgrade when it comes to the coaching staff and really, hopefully, the offensive philosophy with the Chargers. But I would have those two as the top two for sure. And then, then Jalen Hurts really starts throwing things around. I mean, to put him in the category with Tua Tagovailoa seems crazy already after 2 weeks, but he's really impressed. In my rankings, I have Tua next, third on that list, and Jalen Hurts is close behind. Let's see, that's probably all that matters at this point. Jordan Love, maybe we see him in week 17 or something.
Maybe. Herbert, I made a couple deals in the hyperactives for him. I think most people think I overpaid.
No, I remember both of those deals, and I love them.
I gave Ronald Jones in a late second for him, even though I have Lamar, because my thought is I can always trade Lamar for more than that. And there's a case to be made, right or wrong, Herbert versus Lamar long term. Another one where I lost barely, and I was frustrated, to be honest. I had Fitzpatrick, who carried me for 6 weeks, and then I was like, Dalton, okay, and then he throws the clunker. Like, I got to do something. And so I was going after he or Tannehill, just because, and I gave up Gallup in a second. And so could it be too much in a start one quarterback league? Possibly, but I don't mind having a guy long term like Herbert, right?
Yeah, I love them. I love both of those moves. I think we've seen for a long time, really, I mean, maybe for 10 years or so, we've been able to play that late round quarterback game because there've been so many of these reliable guys that you could plug in, and we're seeing them near the end of their career. We're seeing them be less effective overall, certainly less consistent. The ceiling is gone, and we're talking guys like Rivers and Breeze and Ben Roethlisberger. You could throw Brady in there as well, even though he's had a pretty solid season overall. Matt Ryan has struggled, and I would imagine this is his worst season statistically. It certainly feels that way if you've got him on your fantasy roster. So I think the shift to just the younger quarterbacks across the league with players coming in, rookies coming in and starting right away, and also the running quarterbacks. So many of the top quarterbacks right now, not only from a fantasy or a dynasty perspective, but if you just are naming the top quarterbacks in the league, it feels like most of them offer something with their legs as well. So to lock up Justin Herbert in a league for a second and a depth piece like you did, Gallup or Rojo, I love that move.
Well, with Gallup, sure he will improve, but with them mixing in Cedric Wilson and Noah Brown, it kind of makes you wonder what will happen. And with Ronald Jones, with all the running backs they have, what's going to be his role?
Or if they keep him long term and all that other stuff. I just would rather get a centerpiece and forget about it. Even on one quarterback leagues, I do think there's an inefficiency in the marketplace on the quarterback position in one quarterback league because we have punted it so much.
Right, absolutely, and I think a lot of that is, I don't know, almost a mental block or something that so many players in a one quarterback league just refuse to pay for quarterback production, and whether it's a young guy like Herbert or somebody more established, people are content to stream and to search the waiver wire. And honestly, when you can take Justin Herbert in the third round, that's where he went in most of our rookie drafts, even though he's a top 5 or 6 pick in the NFL draft and really has no competition ahead of him. You know, we have to look back at that and be kicking ourselves.
Yeah, and so I have a question. Do you think that's going to push the Zach Wilsons up in rookie drafts? Because people are like, it always seems like we overreact 1 year late. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, we've done it. It didn't happen with Herbert as much this year, but I think about those super flex leagues. 2 years ago, it was, or 3 years ago, I guess it was Josh Allen. Um, it was a game of hot potato. You know, nobody wanted to be the guy who drafted Josh Allen because everybody on Twitter would tell you how bad he was, how bad the mechanics were, and the accuracy. The next year, we saw the exact same thing with Daniel Jones, and although Jones has struggled this year, Allen's kind of taken the next step forward. They've both been productive, or at least they were as rookies in Jones' case. And you got those guys in the second round of super flex leagues. It's crazy. So in this upcoming NFL draft, we could see 5 or 6 first rounders in the NFL draft. And I think even though the wide receiver depth is great, there's a couple really nice tight ends, couple good running backs. I'm kind of at the point where if a quarterback's going to go in the first round of the NFL draft, he should go in the first round of a super flex rookie draft as well.
Even so, how do you feel about Jordan Love then? You trading for him in super flex leagues then?
He's going to be cheap, so yeah, sure.
All right, one thing I want to push in on, because I think you brought up something that needs to be said. Just like we don't want to pay a quarterback, I think we have that same inclination at tight end, and we forget about Kelsey and Waller. We say they're too old. Give me the Hawkinsons, right?
Yeah.
Tell me how much more Kelsey was worth down the stretch than or Waller was. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it just keeps happening. And I mean, honestly, I can kind of see it already starting to happen as some leagues wrap up or players are getting eliminated. We're shifting to that offseason mindset already of, I don't want, like you said, Kelsey and Waller are too old. Now George Kittle is too old suddenly. And Hawkins, I mean, I've seen Hawkinson ranked as tight end 1 overall in Dynasty. And, I mean, no offense, I guess, to people doing that, but I just think we're pushing it too hard. And I've been guilty of it myself, certainly as well, with especially at the wide receiver position. But with tight end, we just continue to be disappointed by this inconsistent play. And Hawkinson's actually been pretty consistent this year. He just hasn't had the ceiling. He's had almost every one of his games have been in that tight end 5 to tight end, let's say 13, 14 range. He hasn't blown up for those huge games that have really kind of stuck in our mind. So Hawkinson's been good, but you look at the others, Goddard, Fant, Andrews, certainly Jonnu Smith and Gesicki. It's hot or cold every week. So the tight end position has been frustrating, but if you've got Waller or certainly if you have Travis Kelce, and I would still include George Kittle in that conversation as well. Of course, his issue was just injury this year. You're sitting pretty and feeling pretty good going into championship week.
Oh, yeah.
Especially in your contract leagues like the KSs. If you have a Kelsey on a 3, that's 34. And age really doesn't have a huge factor into that decision as long as Mahomes is throwing the ball to him.
Right.
Yeah, contract leagues should kind of be a balance. I mean, Jeff, you talked about trading for Jordan Love. Do I want to trade for Jordan Love in general? Sure, he's dirt cheap. In a contract league, I'm not quite as confident. But we still see some of that same mindset. I've got Travis Kelce on one of those kitchen sink teams, and he's on an expiring contract. It's going to be tough to get anything for him, not only because of that contract, but because we're in that offseason point, and now people look at that age 31 beside his name and get scared off a little bit.
So question for you, and then we'll move on. I have these 2 guys in 2 different leagues. I have Hawkinson in one and Goddard in another. Would you offer it straight up for Kelce if your team made the semifinals this year?
I definitely would with Goddard. I think there's more of a ceiling there with him, but yeah, I think I would with either one of them. I mean, if you're playing with that for that title in the short term, yeah,
that's where I fall as well.
And I think you can get that deal done.
So let's look at this year's class. We've touched on it quite a bit, but on the top 6 picks, let's go 1 quarterback leagues, because 2 quarterback makes it a little harder. But for 1 quarterback leagues, can you redraft what you think should be the top 6 picks?
Top 6 for 2021 rookie drafts.
2020.
Oh, redraft. Oh, okay. Yeah, this is a good exercise. So I still think it's kind of the same discussion that we had to start the year, and I still don't know the answer when it comes to running backs versus wide receivers. But let's see. I got to pull up my names here. I think I am going Jonathan Taylor, 101. I think the strong end to his season is going to push him probably into the top 5 of startup drafts this offseason. Again, we're talking one quarterback. So I've got Jonathan Taylor 1. I would have Justin Jefferson 2. And obviously that's a big change from what I was doing last offseason and what pretty much everyone else was doing last offseason. I know he had his believers and his supporters, but nobody expected what we've seen this year. I was even able to trade to acquire him for Todd Gurley right before the season started, and felt like a fair trade at that point. And now it looks like that big win, of course. So I would have Jefferson 2. 3, I think we would probably have to go back to the running backs, and it's close between Swift and J.K. Dobbins for me. Those guys would be 3 and 4. Let's see. How far should I go here, Rhys?
6, 7, 8, wherever your drop is, because you're going to have a tier.
Yes, yeah, and I need to get CeeDee Lamb in there as well. Yes. So Jefferson, yeah, Dobbins, Swift, and Lamb are all very close for me. And then I would probably go back to that running back position, Akers and Antonio Gibson. And then I think it would be Ayuk next, Brandon Ayuk. That's probably the end of that tier.
So no James Robinson.
No. I like him. He's obviously been impressive, but I'm not taking him that high. I mean, if we're totally redrafting, he's probably not even a first rounder for me. Honestly, I think I would take some of those wide receivers, and there's so many of the wide receivers, T. Higgins and Claypool, guys like that. Jerry Jeudy still would take over him.
Pittman, even, you're right. That pool is deep. Pittman, and there's some guys, running back and wide receiver, who we haven't seen much because they just, whether it's Darrington Evans, Van Jefferson, tight end Cole Kmet, and some of those guys could really bounce in year 2 that we have given up on.
Yeah, I mean, this class has felt amazing. Felt like one of the best, if not the best, of all time. And we're still going to have those second-year breakouts or third-year breakouts. So it's going to potentially get even better.
So Ruggs has fallen out of your first round.
Well, Ruggs was never in my first round. I looked at him more as an early second rounder. I had a couple shares in those kitchen sink leagues from our Devi auctions before he came out, but I don't think I drafted him last year in any leagues. I don't believe. I think both he and Bryan Edwards are great buy low targets because unlike Jerry Jeudy, we've seen a price drop on those two guys. All 3 have disappointed for various reasons. But Judy's still expensive. He's still a top 20 wide receiver according to DLF ADP, and he's still going to cost you at least a first rounder, probably more, first round rookie pick. Edwards and Ruggs, I think, are going to be much cheaper. We've seen their ADP and their price drop. And if you try to project what the 2021 Raiders look like, they're still a big part of it. Obviously, Darren Waller is as well. Nelson Aguilar's been their best wide receiver this year, and he's a free agent. So we'll see what they do with him or if they bring in some other competition. But Ruggs and Edwards are still going to be at least projected as their second and third wide receivers, I would think.
What about 2021 class? this coming class? How would you draft the top? Let's go top half of the first round.
Yeah, so this is going to be a scarcity issue because you've got, I think for most people, too strong. Most people consider it a two running back class, at least at the top, with Najee Harris and Travis Etienne. So you've got those two guys at the top, and then it's a dozen wide receivers or so, and the quarterbacks are in there as well if you're talking super flex. But it's going to become a question of, do you take the third running back, or do you take the sixth or seventh or eighth wide receiver? So I think we could see Etienne and Najee Harris both go in the top three, just due to the demand at the position and the scarcity. And then after that, the rest of the first round is going to be a lot of wide receivers. For me, it would be tough to pass on Jamar Chase at the top spot. I'm still a believer in him, still a believer in Rashad Bateman. Another guy that opted out, opted back in, opted out again, and overall has probably lost some value because of all that. I still love Bateman, and then you've got all the Alabama guys to consider. Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle have both grown their value this year.
And Terrace Marshall. There was one person that I wanted to push in on. North Carolina running back, is it Javonte Williams? I may have forgotten his name wrong. But some people have him.
Yeah.
Running back one, running back two. And I'm not saying you're wrong or right. I'm just saying it's always interesting because at this stage, everybody's rankings. All right. Tell me I'm wrong on this. At this stage, everybody's rankings look so different, but come May, there's this pushing it together, and usually I would say right or wrong, and it's usually wrong, that we have this group think.
Mm-hmm.
And think about all the guys that were high on Claypool and never drafted him because of group think or whatever.
Right.
But anyway, the North Carolina running back, what's your thoughts on him? Where do you have him?
Yeah, I think he's claimed that RB3 spot at least. We've seen some of the running backs that people were really high on coming into the season really have just disappointed. I mean, Kylan Hill and Chuba Hubbard both passed up the NFL draft a year ago to go back to school, and both, I think, lost significant value, whether you want to look at the NFL draft or think about Dynasty. Either way, those guys I don't think are going to be considered in the first round of Dynasty rookie drafts at all. Hubbard certainly still has some fans, and I would expect he's maybe an early day 3 pick in the NFL draft. Kylan Hill, I don't know if he even gets drafted, honestly. So Javonte Williams has stepped up and kind of taken advantage of those guys falling off, of the overall weak class. And I think he's the RB3 at worst. And I do think he could challenge Harris and Etienne for a top 2 spot.
I say this totally tongue in cheek. So anybody that's listening, there's sarcasm dripping on this. But I bet Mike Gundy wishes Hubbard would have gone pro after all that blow up. But,
yeah. Well, both of those guys kind of caused some, I don't want to say issues, because in Kylan Hill's case, it was, most people would agree it was for the positive, that with the flag issue there in Mississippi,
Yeah.
But they both certainly made an impact on their team as they came back to school. They just didn't really do that on the field, unfortunately.
oh yeah. So of the rookie class in the first round, where do you have Kyle Pitts?
I think that's going to be one of the big questions, and he's just been. I mean, he's been a superstar all season. So I don't think it's necessarily where do you take Kyle Pitts, but just where are you comfortable taking a tight end in rookie drafts? Because wherever that is, that's probably where Pitts should go. If you don't mind taking a tight end in the top 5, then Pitts is probably going to earn that top 5 designation. He's locked in as a first rounder. Let's start with that. I think you could go as high as top 10 in the NFL draft. And we've seen other guys do that before as well. I mean, and we've seen other players, other tight ends drafted in the first round of rookie drafts. I mean, even going back to Tyler Eifert, Eric Ebron, of course, more recently with Fant and Hawkinson. And then the 2017 year of OJ Howard, Evan Ingram, and David Njoku. I think all of those guys, at least in a large number of rookie drafts, ended up as first rounders. Go back to anybody who took those players in the first round, I'm guessing they're probably feeling a little disappointed about that. I will probably not be the one who ends up with Kyle Pitts in any of my leagues. I think the hype is huge already, and it's going to continue to grow. Looks like a kid who will dominate the combine, whatever that looks like. In today's COVID era, and just going to continue to shoot up boards. So for me, he's still a back half of the first round guy. I think somebody takes him higher than that in most leagues.
I was a fool and took Ebron, then Hawk, and years in between. And my dynasty theory move on that is if you're going to spend a 1-4 on Pitts, I know he's young, offer it for Kittle and see if you can get Kittle for that same price.
Yeah, I think we should. I think that's good advice to do with every position, but especially quarterback and tight end. If you're talking about a one quarterback league or one tight end league, same thing at quarterback. If you're considering Trevor Lawrence at the middle or late part of the first round, try to turn that into Josh Allen or Justin Herbert or whoever. Yeah. It's just it's a little bit more security there.
I gave that exact advice to a mutual friend of ours that lives in New York that's a Jets fan. He was like saying, hey, I'm going to take Lawrence with the 110. I was like, offer it for Dak. Dak's probably QB 2 or 3 next year once he gets healthy and everything with those weapons. And, there's people don't understand. I mean, Dak's 3 or 4 years older and that's it. And he's got this great weaponry and, why not?
Yeah.
Why not do that? Is that's the move you like, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's fun to have Trevor Lawrence or Kyler Murray or Kyle Pitts on your team, these young players. But in those onesie leagues, I just think it's so important to recognize the value of the players that are already in the leagues. And most often you're going to be able to acquire those players for a single first round pick.
That is a great advice, especially in the one quarterback, one tight end positions. What first round pick gets Travis Kelce?
I mean, the deeper we go into the offseason, the cheaper he gets, right? It should be a 1-1 situation, right? That it takes the top overall pick. That's the way he produces and continues to produce. But you can probably get him with the 5 or 6 pick by the time we're to draft season in May or June.
Yep.
Thing with Kelce goes, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think he's had a major injury. Was he held out his first year because of injury or suspension?
It was injury, but that was a long time ago. I mean, he's put up a lot of years of good production.
Yeah, I mean, coming out of college, and there were a lot of injury concerns with Travis Kelce, and he had, I would have to look it up, but he did have a major leg injury that kept him out, and really had concerns that he would never make an impact. So that just makes what he's done the past handful of years even more impressive.
Not unlike Gronk, right? With the back injury.
Yep.
So we'll take away the give me one. But after Lawrence, how would you rank the 2021 rookie quarterbacks?
Which is a hard one given the situations, right?
Yeah. Well, we've had, of course, a lot of it depends on landing spot of these guys. For me, it's still Justin Fields locked in as that QB2. I know there's a little bit of concern on him, and he's how he plays against some of the top competition is an issue. He kind of fell apart against I think it was Indiana, but to me, Fields is still the second option there for sure. And what makes it tough to rank this class is that so many of the really almost all of the other players that you look at as potential first rounders have kind of been breakout guys, right? Kyle Trask and Zach Wilson and even Mac Jones. I mean, none of those players were thought of as potential first rounders to start the season. So there's still, even though all three put up huge seasons and all three were Heisman contenders or are Heisman contenders in some cases, I think there's still some uncertainty and some question about all three as well. And then you've got Trey Lance, who brings even more questions after not only the small school D2 level of play, but then he sits out or he only plays the one game. Lots of questions all around. So I would go right now after Lawrence, Fields. I think I'm going Mac Jones next, and then Zach Wilson. And then I would go Lance and Kyle Trask. So I think those are all the ones who are potential first rounders in the NFL draft.
The irony to me is the people that dog on Fields for how he performs against good competition still like Zach Wilson, and the hardest game he played was Coastal Carolina, and Trey Lance. You know, I mean, like you can't dual-edge sword Fields for playing against good teams, right? When these other guys don't.
Yeah, that's true.
And because Coastal Carolina is probably not the beacon even of Indiana's stature. Indiana's not a bad program nowadays.
No, they had a great year.
Yes. So with Trevor Lawrence, is the Jets or the Jaguars a better landing spot for him to perform year one or even to develop?
Yeah, that was fun to watch this past week. The change there, it had such an impact on the league, maybe for the next decade, right? In that one game. So wild. I know there was a lot of concern about Trevor Lawrence coming into the league and presumably being a Jet, and the weapons that they have right now, the leadership and the questions about the future leadership. And I definitely get that. It looks like now we don't have to worry about that. If things go as planned, he'll be a Jaguar. And I think that's a good thing. Still some questions about their leadership as well. Maybe Doug Marrone stays on. I don't think that would be a great decision, but that's what people, that report is out there that he might get another year. That would be a surprise still to me. But just the weapons alone, with an established running game in James Robinson, a couple good weapons with Chark and Laviska Shenault, plus some depth guys. I don't know the contract status of all of those veterans like Keelan Cole and guys like that, but some nice depth at the receiver position. I even like Colin Johnson, who's kind of come on here in the last few weeks. So I definitely think Jacksonville is a better spot for Lawrence. And if you've got that 101 in a super flex league, not only are the Jags and probably Trevor Lawrence feeling a lot better this week, those players with the 101 in a super flex are probably feeling better too.
Yeah. Lawrence gets a lot more sunshine that he probably likes.
Yeah.
And also, no one's talking about the Jaguars having the Rams first round pick this year. So they could get theoretically another weapon or someone to help protect Lawrence. So he doesn't pull Joe Burrow, or he has no one to throw to, like it sometimes feels with Tua.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, they've just felt like, and maybe this is just a perception thing because Jacksonville got their win so early. They won in week 1. And of course the Jets have been winless up until this past week. So maybe it's just a perception thing, but it feels like the Jaguars have been more competitive, and both of those teams have kind of been on that tank rebuild, productive struggle mold this season in the past couple of years. It just feels like Jacksonville's been more successful with that. And part of that is because of what you said. They've acquired some extra picks heading into the draft.
And I worry that they're too much coaching change, kind of like with Rosen and all that stuff. That's my big worry about Jacksonville.
Yeah, and that's just, we don't know yet, right? And we don't know. We know the Jets are going to change coaching staff. We just don't know about Jacksonville. So what we do know is there's going to be a lot of good options. There's a lot of good young assistant coaches, some college names being thrown around as well. So it seems like, sometimes we have those years and half a dozen openings around the league, and you just think, who's going to get the job? Another Shanahan or another Schottenheimer, or, just kind of these recycled guys of years past. But this year it feels a little different.
Yeah, I was going more of, I wouldn't like him to be drafted in one system, get it the upheaval in year 2. And if it's a bad coaching move, now you have that for year 2, and now you have another one.
Sorry, Rhys. It's the same way we play Dynasty, right? We use our first round picks and we assume everything's going to go as planned, and these guys are always going to gain value, and they're always going to produce. And we think the same thing as NFL fans. A lot of times we think the same thing with coaching hires, that they're going to hire this young offensive coordinator and everything's going to go great and turn that team around. And of course, the reality is that doesn't always happen. And sometimes you end up with Adam Gase.
Well, I was thinking of, whenever you mentioned coaching turnover, I was thinking of Baker Mayfield and how he had Hugh Jackson, Freddie Kitchens, and all that coaching carousel. And he's still on a new coach, but at least he's in a system that helps him succeed, which I do think is something the Jaguars should look for. Get the zone read option. I believe Greg Roman would be a great fit if you get Trevor Lawrence. And I think Trevor Lawrence would want to be there if you can get the zone read and also have James Robinson. I think James Robinson will do better if people don't have to stack the box 8 or 9 defenders in there.
Brian Daboll as well for Buffalo. So what do the Jets do now that they lost Lawrence? Do they select Fields? Do they trade the pick and try to build around Darnold? Do they drop the OT Sowell? They do.
Yeah, I have no idea. First of all, I think that's kind of the $1 million question, where their path was so clear a week ago that it's easy. You take what you can get for Darnold, you get your 4th round pick or whatever you can. You take Lawrence and you're good to go. And now there's so many options, and we haven't seen the Jets. We haven't seen the Jets succeed when they have to make these tough decisions. It's been better lately under their current GM, but their track record over the past 5 to 10 years is not strong. So everything you laid out is really the way it could go. You keep Darnold, you draft Penny Sewell, and that's kind of plan A, I would think. And it really comes down to what you think of Justin Fields. So many people seem to think he's half a step off of Trevor Lawrence when it comes to being an NFL prospect. And if that's what you think, then you stick with that plan. You trade Darnold and you draft Fields. If you see a clear difference, or if you don't think Fields is a clear upgrade over Sam Darnold, then you have to draft the offensive lineman or trade the pick. I guess we'll see how much demand there is in a trade.
For me, I think if I'm the Jets, I would trade back and try to get a 1st rounder or 2. Draft someone like Zach Wilson or Mac Jones, who is not that much of a downgrade from Fields, and try to build around Darnold in a different way for at least a couple years. See how he goes without Gase, because Gase has kind of tanked him, essentially.
But also, they already have their tackle at Becton. So what other positions, if they trade back, would they invest in, is the other hypothetical question, right, Brian? Like, think about this, the trickle down for dynasty value. What does it do from Denzel Mims' value or Crowder's value going without Lawrence now? Because a lot of people were investing heavily on Mims with Lawrence.
Yeah, with the idea that Trevor Lawrence would be throwing to him for the next 8 or 10 years. Yeah, it impacts the entire team, and it certainly and obviously impacts the draft plan. So trading down to me always feels like the best option. I'm not ready to give the Jets credit for making those good decisions. I mean, honestly, they should have done whatever they could do to lose that game, and
Right.
it's hard to tell the players that. You know, you're not going to tell Frank Gore to lose, or Sam Darnold, who's playing for his job. But it's just unreal from a franchise standpoint that they actually won that game.
Adam Gase getting his revenge.
Yeah.
But the value of the
really was.
franchise, the value of the franchise took a dip that one day. You know what I mean? Like whatever the value that you could sell the Jets for with Lawrence versus without is a big difference, which is crazy, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
crazy.
a good point, but it's true.
So we talked about top 5 dynasty quarterbacks earlier. Who are your top 5 dynasty wide receivers? This could be rookies or just in general.
Oh, any wide receivers?
Any.
Let's see. I've got to pull it up. I think the position this year, we've seen it this year, maybe more than others, has become really just wide open, right? And kind of fluid. DK Metcalf is my wide receiver 1. AJ Brown is my wide receiver 2. We can start with the 2 easy ones off the bat. Justin Jefferson is actually my 3, which is probably aggressive on him, but I'm good with that. And then I think you have to look at the older guys, the veterans. Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill would be my next 2.
I have Adams 1, and then my next 4 I have Jefferson outside the 5, but my next 4 are no order, but Brown, Metcalf, Lamb, because I really like Lamb when Dak gets back, and Terry McLaurin, only because I think McLaurin, we haven't really seen what he's like. I mean, we've had him with Haskins, Kyle Allen, and Alex Smith, and I'm looking forward to the day that the Washington football team has a legit quarterback for Terry McLaurin.
Yeah, I like McLaurin a lot for sure. He would be in that next group. The one player who I think is becoming he's moving up my list both of rankings and of offseason trade targets is Calvin Ridley.
Yes.
We continue to see him dominate with Julio, without Julio, when Matt Ryan stinks or when he's on his game. Ridley has produced, and he came in to the league as that older prospect, and everybody wanted to knock him for that. He's still young. He's 26, right? Just turned 26 on Sunday. He set new career highs in that game and with targets, receptions, and yardage on his birthday. So pretty big day for Calvin Ridley. But in general, I'm seeing other wide receivers like Lamb, and I agree with you. I've got Lamb high as well, but Lamb and DK and AJ Brown and Justin Jefferson leap over him in rankings and in ADP. And Ridley's not going to be cheap, but I think he's going to be cheaper than he should be this offseason in drafts or in trade.
And to that point, all the rookies that you would draft in this next rookie class, you hope that they become Calvin Ridley. And that's my view.
And I would do the same thing. And in fact, I don't, not everybody keeps their own dynasty rankings, so you can kind of do this however you want. But before I make any dynasty rookie pick, I try to look at my rankings. If I'm going to take Jamar Chase with the 1.03, I look and see where do I have Jamar Chase ranked right now? And maybe he's the wide receiver 14. So I should offer this pick for all of those players ahead of him, theoretically, if you trust your rankings, or if you're just in a couple leagues and you don't keep your own rankings, check out Jeff's, check out mine, whoever you trust, and think about where you're valuing that rookie compared to the players that are already in the league. And of course, there's different situations. If you're talking about a full rebuild, and trading Chase for Michael Thomas or something might not be the move you want to make, but those are the questions you should ask yourself and things you should consider before you make any picks or any moves like that.
So one question I have for you on that, and they're the tape guys in our field and they're the analytics guys, and they're always doing battle, right?
Yeah.
Always. And I'm like, I feel like I should wear a striped shirt and say, go to your corners. But for me on that, I almost think that we have such small sample sizes that we want to throw the Ridleys out because they're too old and call them an outlier. Where when you just watch him play, you're like, that guy's a good player. You know what I mean? And because he was an older breakout age, so we knocked him, or whatever it is. And I just think we need to judge players on players and use film and analytics together and marry them and all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, we should. And the age concerns on a guy like Calvin Ridley, it's not because he's 2 years older than everybody in his class, and maybe that means his career is 2 years shorter than those guys. That's not the issue. The concern is, as a 22-year-old, he's playing against 18-year-olds in college, and he's dominating them as he should, as you would expect. The concern is then, can that player, whether it's Calvin Ridley or AJ Green was in that same situation. Green was actually older than Calvin Ridley when they each came into the league. Jalen Waddle is one of the older prospects this year coming into the league. So once they prove that they can make that transition and that they can basically play at a similar high level as they did in college, then the age stuff is out the window. That no longer becomes a concern.
But still, people hold it though.
Right. That's what I was
still
going to say.
see this. And there are some guys that just mature later. I mean, I think of your boy, Devontae Parker. How long did it take him to mature in the NFL? How long did it take? I mean, we go down.
7th year breakout.
Yeah. Adams was a couple years, right? And there were just several guys that it took a little bit, and that's okay. I mean, it's the same in all of our professions, and it's okay, Yeah,
it just makes what you said so true, that we really, we tried to do comps, and it's like comp season, right? As we start talking NFL draft, who does Kyle Pitts remind you of, or who does Travis Etienne remind you of? And I get that. I mean, it gives you some perspective and kind of gives you an idea of what to expect or what that player looks like on the field. But in the end, you're right. We just need to start judging those players on an individual basis, and that's probably going to help you become a better dynasty player.
Yeah. You mentioned marrying analytics and tape. The thing that does that best that I've seen is Perception by Matt Harmon, where he watches tape and then makes analytics off of it. And I think if we did that a lot better, like the way he does it, it'd be very successful.
And it would give us a logical comparison. The other thing is, how many Travis Etiennes are there to compare against? There aren't that many. And so we should think of it on a spectrum. And so too many times we think of it like binary, like a light switch. It's on or it's off. Where really it's, I think he's 74% MJD or whatever. You know what I mean? It should be on a spectrum, left to right. Here's his ceiling, here's his floor, and move from there. Don't you think? Or do you think that it's hard to quantify? I think Etienne's going to look like X.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, when we hear those comps, just like the age thing, we get it locked in and kind of associate those players for the rest of their careers, which ultimately is not going to be fair to at least one of them, maybe both of them.
Yeah, those Alabama running backs before Josh Jacobs.
Yeah.
So we mentioned wide receivers. Who are your top 10 dynasty startup? What are your top 10 dynasty startup rankings?
This is tough.
Yeah. This is a biggie. So I actually just updated my top 250 rankings for Superflex. So that was a job. We can skip the quarterbacks if you want, but I went very quarterback heavy in those ranks and pretty wide receiver heavy. So my top 6 players there are quarterbacks. Do you want me to focus on running backs and wide receivers, Rhys?
Yes.
Yeah. So my first non-quarterback would be DK Metcalf, first overall, AJ Brown second overall, and then I would have Christian McCaffrey third. I think McCaffrey still ends up being the top pick if you're thinking about off-season startups. I still think he'll be the top pick in most drafts. He's the 1.01 in our current ADP at DLF. But for me, the way I build teams, I look a little more long-term. So I would opt for the wide receivers that are younger and have been productive already. So Metcalf and Brown at the top, then McCaffrey, Justin Jefferson, and then I've got Jonathan Taylor fifth. And then kind of shift a little bit as we get to the back half of the first round on that current production. Adams, Kamara, Barkley, Dalvin Cook, Tyreek Hill, Calvin Ridley.
Wow. You're going to move markets. So they're talking about people moving Vegas lines. Ryan's going to move rankings just with, some of that. I think having Ridley in your top, your first round of a startup is uncommon. Let me just say it that way. You agree?
Yeah, it would be. But again, I think about those current productive wide receivers, and it's Adams and Tyreek Hill and Calvin Ridley. They're all in that same age range. They're all in the same production range. Makes sense to me.
I'm not disagreeing. I'm just here to help the fodder. So I have a question. On the super flex leagues that you and I play in, you and I on opposite sides, 4 out of the 5 we're in together.
Yes.
I try to be very quarterback heavy, because, like one of our mutual competitors offered me Mahomes earlier this off season for Tua and Herbert. And I have them both on my taxi. No way I'd do that now. But I even turned it away then because having one player doesn't help you as much as having two. So are you stockpiling quarterbacks in those leagues? And when I say quarterbacks, I don't mean the Ryan Finleys. I mean even if it's Teddy Bridgewater or Ryan or Matt Ryan or somebody like that, are you still trying to acquire those guys?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think, and this is, we see it every year, but it feels like it's been ramped up a little bit this year with injuries and COVID and everything else. But we've just seen so many starting quarterbacks around the league, even if a guy like Finley is just getting 1 or 2 starts. So when it comes, really every chance I have to acquire quarterbacks, whether we're drafting or in those leagues we use auctions. But if we're doing a rookie auction, a Devy auction, I'm always kind of leaning towards quarterbacks. Get as many on your roster as you can, and then they're going to gain some value. They're going to have a role in general at some point, and you're going to be able to profit off of that and flip them for a draft pick or package them for an upgrade at another spot.
Yep. And so I think of the trades I made in those leagues, they were all for quarterbacks. You know what I mean? Breeze on an expiring deal plus a late first rounder for Matt Ryan on a 3. Matt Ryan stunk this year, but still you have Matt Ryan locked up, and Ryan has very insidious rules now that he's putting in the KS leagues. Very insidious. So Rhys, you have a player, let's call him Ben Roethlisberger. He's on an expiring contract, and you want to RFA him because let's not use Ben. Let's use Teddy Bridgewater because he's a 1 on a lot of leagues. You put him out there on RFA because you want to win him back and give him a contract. Seems reasonable, right? But let's say he gets bid up for $3.99, Ryan, which is what, a second and third equivalent.
Yeah, I think that's 101.
So you get the choice, 101 rookie, which isn't very much. Or if you choose to keep that guy, now it costs you the $3.99 in all-purpose money that you'd use on blind bid, plus 10 rookie to keep him. Is that right, Ryan? Do I have that right?
You're pretty close. Yeah, I think we're going to do 20%. So it would be Yeah, it'd be more like 20. Yeah, in those leagues, we were just seeing, and I know you saw this, Jeff, and because you're a good dynasty player, you took advantage of it too. We were just seeing um, teams be able to keep their players and ultimately give them new long-term contracts uh, very easily. We were rarely seeing players switch team, switch. If you're going to have a contract, if you're going to play in a contract league and you're going to have that restricted free agent process, you know, you want it to be interesting and fun. And honestly, it just hadn't been interesting or fun lately because everybody kind of knew how it would go. You were going to get a big number put on Patrick Mahomes, and you were going to match no matter what, and keep that guy and lock him up for the next 4 years. So I think this will add a new wrinkle and add a little challenge to hang on to those guys.
So that 20 is 2/3 of a third round pick. And so that's why it was worth it to me to give up that rookie money to be able to have Ryan under contract. I don't know how it's going to play out. Brees may retire, so it looks good. He may be able to sell Brees. Don't know how that works out, but it was worth it to me to have a quarterback locked up for 2 more years after this.
Yep.
Makes sense.
I'm not saying I believe in Matt Ryan. It's the only league I have him in. But, right? All right. Last question, Ryan.
If you're Eric Bieniemy or the top coaching, or Rob Saleh, if you want to be a defensive guy, where would you go? What's the most intriguing place, either that's already open or will probably be open?
I think there's some good ones. And I think you have to start, whether you're an offensive coordinator, offensive minded coach, or defensive, I think you have to start by looking at the quarterback position. So because of that, of course, Houston is very interesting. But you also, when it comes to Houston, you think about those draft picks, and they've been a little loose with those. So your road to rebuild or road to being a real contender is a little tougher. I think this is an easy one. I think it's the Chargers, hands down. You've got Justin Herbert. You've got multiple impact defensive players. You're probably going to have a top 5 pick. It's the Chargers, no doubt. Plus you get to live in LA and hopefully try to get some fans out there. That's what that team needs more than anything, is some support.
So Ryan, the look Rhys and I gave each other is we've asked our last at least 2 guests this, and my answer each time has been the Chargers. And only because Herbert's the goods.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know you have a great defense, Derwin James and all those other guys on D. Bosa, right?
Yeah.
You have Keenan Allen and Eckler and Hunter Henry. Hunter Henry's a free agent, but even my boy Tyron Johnson's played pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what I'm saying? I mean, they haven't drafted very well. That's wasting that pick on Joshua Kelly and some of those other guys makes me shake my head. But they still have a good framework.
Yeah, absolutely. You look at that team, and I've started to do this recently. Kind of look at each of those main 4 fantasy skill positions and think about whether it's just because of a gap and a weakness at a specific area, or maybe it's because of free agency. Where are the questions with that team as we enter the offseason? And the Chargers don't really have one. They've got a couple strong running backs. They've got obviously locked up Herbert for the next decade. Allen is there. Mike Williams he's fine. He's a good solid number 2. Hunter Henry's a free agent, I think. So that's something they obviously need to address. But and then like we both said, they've got multiple impact defensive players. I know every year this team seems to deal with injuries. So I don't know. I don't know if it's a training staff issue or what, but it's something that they always seem to have problems with. So, but you just think they don't really have any holes, and they're going to be able to add another impact player in the draft, at least one. So I think it's a great landing spot. Rhys, what's your answer to that question?
Especially since he's an AFC West Broncos fan. I mean, this is an interesting conversation.
For me, it would depend on what you want. If you want to develop a prospect, I would go to Chargers or even Jacksonville, where you get to develop not only Lawrence but his receiving core. But if I'm the enemy and I don't really develop quarterbacks, that's not really what I do. I go either to the Texans, but with their bad situation, I'm going to do the same answer that I did on the last one, and I'm going to go with the Falcons, because Falcons, all they need to do is shore up their defense. And you got Julio Jones, Ridley, Hurst, Gage, and a strong running back class to replace Ito Smith.
Not Gurley.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I can go with you down this road, Rhys. You look at the Falcons, and I mean, how much longer does Matt Ryan have? Right? He's shown us this year it might not be much longer. And if the Falcons use that first round pick on Zach Wilson or Kyle Trask or somebody like that, I wouldn't be surprised. They have no running game, whether it's Todd Gurley or Ito Smith or Tevin Coleman or Devontae Freeman. I mean, their running game has stunk for years now, basically since Freeman had that overall RB1 game. They've had no running game. Calvin Ridley's great. Julio Jones has shown he's on the back end, right? I mean, next year could be his AJ Green year, where it's like, oh, why'd we take that guy? Why'd we use a 4th round pick on Julio Jones in a redraft? So I don't know. I think that team has a lot of questions.
The one positive is the other 2 best teams in that division are old. The Saints are old. The Buccaneers are old.
Yeah.
And a coach could hang on, build it for 1 year, and be sitting pretty if they could make it that far.
One reason why I would choose the Falcons if I'm Eric Bieniemy is go for a year or 2, show how much you're worth, and then try to go to a different team, not get fired, but just pull Belichick and leave. Or Gruden.
But that's hard to do. That's hard to do because there's a lot of out clauses. Think about, the Jets. That job's not as attractive right now, is it?
Well, no, that's the other thing we didn't talk about earlier is, I mean, not only did it lose literal financial value and worth, but it's not nearly as appealing as it was 2 or 3 days ago.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, think about this thought process, right? Joe Douglas is doing these coaching interviews, and he's either looking for somebody that loves Darnold or loves one of the rookies. But then he's got to figure out how to do the trickle down for whichever one it is. And I say the trickle down because if it's Darnold, you're going to want to trade back and get a haul like what the Rams got for Goff. Think about what the Redskins at the time gave up for RG2 to move up for RG2. You're going to want to leverage. If you're not taking a quarterback at 2, you want to trade back early and often. Don't you agree?
Yeah, and that coaching decision is going to impact everything else. Just like you said, if you bring in someone who is sold on Fields, now you've got to trade Darnold. If you've got someone who thinks they can save Darnold's career, now you've got to decide: are we taking Sewell or are we moving? And if you're moving, you got to get to work.
And the answer, looking back, has always been moving.
Yeah. Yep.
I feel like a lot of times, if we're going to do mock drafts, I feel like a lot of people will just overthink it and try to project. But I do think they're going to draft Fields at number 2.
But I was going to defend Rhys a little bit on this. The Falcons' job, I think, is more appealing now than it was. I mean, they haven't been that many years since losing the Super Bowl. Not very many teams can say that. They do have a franchise quarterback. They do have some key spots. They have a great owner in Arthur Blank. There are some things that are great selling points to that job.
Also,
yeah, it just feels like they haven't gotten any better since that
Right.
Super Bowl run, right? Like across the board, they've taken hits. They're another team, especially on defense, that can't seem to stay healthy. Suffered some rough injuries the past couple of years. So I don't know, that would be a team. If we're talking just buying and selling futures, I'm selling the Falcons over the next couple of years.
More so than like the Saints or Buccaneers?
Yeah, because I believe in. I mean, both of those teams have their coaching staffs in place, and those are both coaching staffs I trust. As a fantasy player, I want to invest in Sean Payton offenses, whether it's Drew Brees or not. And I would say the same thing about Tampa.
I'm going to follow. Can I push in as we elongate this show just a smidge?
Sure.
Antonio Brown. I'm sure he enjoyed Monday night's Bengals-Steelers game, and is he going to be a long-term, is he going to be able to play another year? Or do you know what I'm saying? Like in the Dynasty world, if you believe in him, he's super cheap. If you don't believe in him, he's not. Yeah, you might as well just sell him and avoid him. But I mean, he's what, second in their team in targets since he's come back? I mean, he's being used more than Godwin. And I mean, there's upside risk, but there's upside in Dynasty. What's your take?
I mean, I think he's just been fine, right? I mean, he hasn't had that blow up game, and I feel like if he plays another year, it's going to be with Tampa. Obviously, the Brady connection is what brought him there. So I don't see him going really to any other team. With him, it's just a question of, is he going to stay out of trouble? Yeah. Right. He was active for a week or so before we heard this other report about some off-field issue. And I think it's probably minor, but when you have that history, especially such a recent history over the past year or so of all these things that he's been involved in, you can't yell at the security guard or whatever it was that happened. I don't know. I probably won't be a buyer on Brown. Like I said, he's just been fine. It's going to, whatever happens with Chris Godwin, Tampa's going to remain a crowded situation. And as much as Brady has that connection with Brown, he's got, I think, an even stronger one with Gronk, and he's going to continue just to spread the ball around. So I'm not really a buyer on any of those Buccaneers right now.
How about Fournette? I'm sure he's one of your faves, isn't he?
I don't know. He might be sitting here on the couch with us this time next year. I think he'll be lucky to find a job, honestly. I won't be surprised if Fournette and Gurley and Le'Veon Bell are all out of the league next year.
Wow. Because I thought Bell's looked pretty good.
Oh, really? I don't know. I've not been impressed. I guess he's kind of got his time to shine these last 2 weeks with Clyde out. Definitely has a chance to earn a job for next year. I don't think it'll be with Kansas City, most likely, with Williams expected back. But think about really with all three of those players, not only what we've seen on the field, which has not been great, but it took a while for each of them to find a job. They were all out there and available for periods of time this past off season, and those teams took chances on them. And I don't think they've earned another chance, actually.
Yeah, go ahead.
I feel like if I'm Bell, I go down to Houston, pair up with Deshaun Watson, and see what happens. And if I'm Houston, I agree with it. Could take a time to a 1 year, $3 million deal. See what happens, even though you just trade for David Johnson, who is apparently worth just a little bit less than Hopkins.
But, those three running backs are three of the most highly paid over the last 2 or 3 years. Mm-hmm. If you think about it, Fournette got his money. Bell got the most, I think. Gurley got a ton. History has not been kind to paying running backs. And I'm looking at Dallas choosing Zeke over Dak, even McCaffrey, and not that I'm against those guys. Just like, are you sure you want to spend 10% of your cap on a running back?
Yeah, I pointed this out and mentioned it the other day on Twitter when Tony Pollard had his big game. I had to look up Zeke's contract. It expires in 2027. 2027. that contract. And none of us really think he's going to be a Cowboy until 2027. Nobody expects that. But it's just the hole that the Cowboys have dug for themselves when you're less than a year or a year or whatever it is into this new contract, long-term contract, and you're already looking at when we can get out. I don't know how anybody can defend that decision.
Shoot, but they can't, I see Jerry Jones quote. He was asked this after the Pollard breakout, and he says, "Oh, we got needs on this team. We got to be able to pay everybody." And I'm like, "You should have paid Zeke. You paid Zeke more than you're gonna be, than he offered Dak at the time, or close to it."
Yeah, just crazy. And I mean, maybe McCaffrey breaks that mold. We saw McCaffrey get paid. We saw Austin Eckler and Joe Mixon and Dalvin Cook all got paid last offseason, heading into what could have been a contract year for them. So we still have a pretty strong running back free agent class with Aaron Jones included in that. But I don't know, just in general, giving those monster deals to running backs is a bad plan.
Oh yeah.
The only three that have broken that mold that I've seen that happened this year is Henry, Cook, and Kamara. But can they sustain it, especially Henry, who's a year older and plays a little bit more physically, which has not been kind to Cook with his injury history, which has shown up every year. And Kamara's the only one that looks sustainable, even though there's a huge question mark with Taysom Hill versus Drew Brees.
Oh yeah, Kamara fantasy managers sure felt that difference.
I mean, the issue is that the contracts they're giving are longer than the typical relevancy of a running back, even a starting running back. I mean, we all joke about Frank Gore, but we don't see running backs hang around the league for even 10 years.
Right.
And when you draft them and they play 3 or 4 years and then you give them a 5-year deal, the majority of these running backs are going to be they're going to be done before their contracts are done, basically. So yeah, I mean, of course, Kamara and Henry and Cook have looked good this year. But I think we could skip ahead 2 more years and those guys still have 3 years left on their deal. And those teams and fans are going to be disappointed.
Yes. And that's the one reason why I'm not unhappy when a team takes running back in the first round, because now they have the 5th-year option and can tag him. 6 years is a long time to have that running back under contract without having to give him a long-term deal.
Yeah. And we'll see how it plays out with Saquon Barkley here. Of course, that's going to be kind of the next test case, and I'm sure he will be asking for that new mega deal pretty soon.
Oh yeah, and then all the beat writers in New York say dollars per game played, and it doesn't look so good for Barkley. Ryan, you're an awesome guest. We hope to have you back as we move out of the season here in a few weeks and go towards draft prep. So thank you for making time with us.
Yes, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Anytime. Thanks for having me on.
Always.